Stop scrolling, don't blink, and don't assume you already know where this is going, because what I'm about to say is not comfortable, not polished, and not designed to make you feel good in the next 30 seconds. It's designed to stay with you long after this video ends. Most people will hear the first minute and think they understand it. They don't. The truth only reveals itself if you stay long enough to feel uncomfortable. And discomfort is where clarity begins. You've been told stories about feelings, love, confidence, and success that sound good but don't hold up in real life. You've been sold intensity instead of depth, noise instead of meaning, reactions instead of decisions. And maybe you've felt it. That quiet sense that something doesn't add up, that what you're chasing isn't actually moving you forward. This isn't another motivational speech telling you to believe more or want it harder. That advice is cheap. This is about how people actually think, choose, and build when no one is watching. It's about the difference between what feels powerful in the moment and what remains powerful over time. If you're looking for entertainment, this video will disappoint you. But if you're looking for something that challenges the way you approach connection, ambition, and self-respect, then stay. Not because I need your attention, but because this might be the first time you hear something that doesn't try to win you over. By the end of this video, you won't feel hyped. You'll feel clear. And clarity is dangerous because once you see things accurately, you can't unsee them. You'll start noticing patterns you ignored, choices you justified, and opportunities you misunderstood. So don't watch this casually. Watch it deliberately. Because if you're still here at the end, something in you is ready for this before you even clicked play. Listen closely, because this part matters more than anything else I said. Most people misunderstand feelings. They think feelings are something that happens to you, like weather. One moment calm, the next moment chaos. They think love is a sudden crash, an accident, an emotional explosion that knocks logic out of the room. And because they believe that, they excuse impulsive behavior, inconsistency, and emotional instability by calling it passion. That's not strength. That's a lack of control. Real feelings don't arrive screaming. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like a system booting up in the background. They don't hijack your mind. They integrate with it. They don't make you lose focus. They sharpen it. I didn't wake up one day overwhelmed by emotion and call that truth. I watched patterns. I noticed how my thinking changed over time. I paid attention to what stayed consistent, even when excitement disappeared. Because anything real doesn't need constant stimulation to survive. Emotional chaos feels intense, but intensity is not depth. Fireworks look impressive, but they disappear in seconds. Gravity, on the other hand, is invisible, silent, and impossible to escape. That's the difference between impulsive emotion and intentional feeling. When something is real, it doesn't demand immediate expression. It doesn't rush to be announced. It waits. It tests itself against reality. It asks difficult questions instead of romantic ones. It asks, does this make me better? Does this hold up under pressure? Does this still make sense when no one is watching? And here's something most people never admit. If a feeling can't survive silence, it's not real. If it panics in the absence of attention, it was built on insecurity, not truth. I allowed space. I allowed time. I allowed doubt. Because doubt is not the enemy of real feelings. Doubt is the filter. Anything genuine passes through it stronger. Anything fake collapses under it. I didn't confuse attraction with meaning. Attraction is easy. Biology can do that on its own. Meaning requires thought. Meaning requires alignment of values, direction, and mindset. Meaning asks whether two trajectories actually point toward the same future, not just the same moment. That's why I say these feelings are engineered, not accidental. They were formed through observation, reflection, and discipline. I noticed how my standards didn't lower. My goals didn't shrink. My sense of direction didn't blur. Instead, they became more defined. That's the test. If a feeling makes you abandon your values, it's not love. It's escape. If it makes you lose yourself, it's not connection. It's dependency. Real feelings don't make you smaller. They make you more precise. They don't pull you away from your purpose. They challenge you to live up to it. They don't distract you from growth. They demand it. And this is where people get uncomfortable, because intentional feelings remove excuses. You can't hide behind, I couldn't help it. You can't blame emotion for poor decisions. You are responsible for what you build. That responsibility is heavy, but it's also empowering, because it means what I feel is not fragile. It's not at the mercy of mood swings, external validation, or temporary circumstances. It's stable. It's resilient. I didn't choose these feelings because they were easy. I chose them because they made sense. Because they aligned with how I think, how I build, and how I move forward. And if that sounds less romantic to you, that's because romance has been oversold as chaos. But the most powerful forces in the universe are not chaotic. They are structured, they are predictable, they are governed by laws. Emotion without structure burns out. Emotion with structure becomes momentum. That's why I didn't rush to speak. Words have consequences. Once you say something, it exists. So before I spoke, I made sure this feeling could survive being real, not just being imagined. And it did. It survived distance. It survived silence. It survived reality. That's how I know it's not noise. What I feel is not a reaction, it's a decision. Not a spike, but a direction. Not a moment, but a process. And if you take anything from this, let it be this: don't trust feelings that arrive without thought. Trust the ones that remain after it. Let's go deeper, because this is where most people get it wrong. A lot of what people call love is actually imagination. It's a projection. A mental movie they cast someone into, based not on who that person is, but on what they want to feel. That's why it feels so good in the beginning. You're not connecting to reality yet. You're connecting to potential, to fantasy, to an idealized version that hasn't been tested. And fantasies are comfortable because they don't resist you. But growth does. Real connection doesn't live in the highlight reel. It lives in the boring hours, the difficult conversations, the moments when things don't go your way and there's no dramatic soundtrack playing in the background. That's where reality shows up, and reality is the only environment where something meaningful can actually be built. I'm not interested in love that only exists when things are easy. Easy is cheap. Anyone can feel close when life is smooth and attention is high. The real question is what happens when energy is low, pressure is high, and expectations collide with limitations. That's when fantasy collapses. Growth, on the other hand, begins exactly there. If a connection doesn't challenge you to evolve, it will eventually suffocate you. Comfort without growth turns into stagnation. Stagnation slowly becomes resentment, and resentment kills whatever excitement was there in the first place. This is why I don't chase idealized romance. Idealization freezes people in place. It doesn't allow them to be human, to change, to make mistakes, to improve. It traps them in an image that can never be maintained, and sooner or later, that image breaks. I want something dynamic, something that moves. Growth-based connection isn't about constant happiness, it's about alignment under motion. Two people moving forward, not perfectly, not always at the same speed, but in the same direction. That requires effort. Not performative effort, not grand gestures for applause, but quiet, consistent effort that shows up when there's nothing to gain immediately. Effort to listen when it would be easier to defend. Effort to stay curious instead of assuming. Effort to build understanding instead of winning arguments. Fantasy avoids effort by design. It promises that the right person will make everything feel effortless forever. That idea is comforting, but it's also destructive, because it sets people up to abandon something real the moment it requires work. Anything that matters requires work. Not because it's broken, but because it's alive. Growth also demands honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront who you are, not who you like to imagine yourself to be. It exposes insecurities, habits, blind spots. And many people don't want that exposure. They want validation, not evolution. But validation doesn't move you forward. It just keeps you comfortable where you are. I don't want a connection that protects my ego. I want one that challenges my thinking. One that forces me to refine how I communicate, how I listen, how I respond under stress. Because that kind of pressure doesn't weaken you. It shapes you. And here's the part people avoid talking about. Growth means friction. Not conflict for the sake of drama, but friction in the sense that two independent minds will not always align perfectly. There will be resistance, there will be disagreement, and that's not a flaw, that's data. What matters is how that friction is handled. Do you learn from it, or do you personalize it? Do you adapt, or do you retreat? Do you build better systems of understanding, or do you blame the other person for not being easy? Fantasy runs from friction. Growth studies it. Because every point of tension reveals something useful, if you're willing to look at it without defensiveness. That's why I don't promise constant comfort. Comfort is unstable. The world will disrupt it sooner or later. What I value is resilience. The ability to stay connected while adapting to change. This kind of connection doesn't rescue you from life, it equips you to face it. It doesn't replace your purpose, it integrates with it. You don't lose momentum, you gain leverage. And leverage is powerful. When two people support each other's growth, the result isn't dependency, it's amplification. Each person becomes more capable, more focused, more grounded. Not because they are completed by the other, but because they are challenged to operate at a higher level. That's the opposite of fantasy, which often feeds on weakness and fear of being alone. I don't want to be needed because of insecurity. I want to be chosen because of clarity. And that choice has to be renewed, not assumed. Growth requires continuous alignment. You don't set it once and forget it. You revisit it. You update it. You improve it as conditions change. That's how anything complex survives over time. So when I say I want growth, not fantasy, I'm saying I want something that can withstand reality without breaking. Something that gets stronger with pressure instead of collapsing under it. Because the goal is not to feel good for a moment. The goal is to build something that lasts. And if you're listening to this and recognizing the difference, then here's the question you should sit with. Are you chasing how something makes you feel, or are you building who you are becoming? The answer to that question will determine everything that follows. Now let's talk about the part that makes people uncomfortable, because it strips away excuses and exposes intent. Most people chase. They chase attention. They chase reassurance. They chase validation from people who haven't earned the right to influence their self-worth. And they call that effort. But chasing is not strength. Chasing is fear disguised as movement. When you chase, you hand over control. You allow someone else's response, delay, or silence to determine your emotional state. You turn your value into something negotiable. Something that rises or falls based on how quickly someone replies, how warmly they react, or how much attention they give you. That's not connection. That's dependency. Real confidence doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to convince. It doesn't need to prove itself repeatedly. It stands where it is visible, consistent, and grounded, and it lets reality do the sorting. When something has real value, it doesn't beg to be chosen. It is simply available to be recognized. This is where people confuse arrogance with self-respect. Arrogance demands attention. Self-respect does not. Arrogance tries to dominate the room. Self-respect doesn't need the room at all. It knows who it is before anyone else reacts. I don't chase because chasing implies scarcity. It implies that if I don't run faster, speak louder, or perform better, I'll lose something essential. But what's essential doesn't disappear because you didn't beg for it. If something leaves because you didn't chase it, it was never aligned with you to begin with. Standing still, when done intentionally, is not passivity, it's selection. It's saying, this is who I am, this is what I offer, and I'm not diluting it for approval. That kind of stillness is powerful because it filters. It repels people who are addicted to attention and attracts people who recognize substance. Confidence isn't about dominance, it's about internal stability. It's about knowing that your direction doesn't change based on external noise. Compliments don't inflate you. Rejection doesn't dismantle you. You stay in motion regardless. And motion is the key word here. Because not chasing doesn't mean standing still in life. It means moving forward without dragging someone behind you or running after someone who isn't moving in the same direction. I keep moving. I keep building. I keep refining who I am and what I stand for. If someone aligns with that movement, they can walk beside me. If they don't, I don't stop the system to convince them. Systems that work don't pause for validation. People who chase often think they're being humble or romantic. But humility is not self-erasure. Romance is not self-abandonment. When you constantly pursue someone who isn't reciprocating with clarity, you're not showing depth. You're showing that you're willing to trade your dignity for potential. Potential is not a promise. Standing visible means being clear without pressure. It means expressing interest without attachment to outcome. It means saying, this is real, and being okay if the response is silence. Silence is information. So is hesitation. So is inconsistency. Confidence listens to data instead of arguing with it. I don't chase mixed signals. I don't try to decode ambiguity into hope. If something is real, it doesn't need excessive interpretation. Clarity might take time, but it doesn't require confusion. And here's the paradox most people miss. When you stop chasing, you don't lose opportunities. You lose illusions. You stop investing energy into things that were never going to return it in equal measure. That reclaimed energy goes somewhere else. It goes into your work, your thinking, your growth, your trajectory. And that's attractive, whether people admit it or not. Not because you're withholding, not because you're playing games, but because you're anchored. Anchored people are rare. They don't panic when attention fluctuates. They don't overreact to temporary distance. They don't rush to fill silence with noise. They understand that consistency over time says more than intensity in the moment. This kind of confidence doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through behavior, through how you handle uncertainty, through how you respond to disappointment, through how little you need to explain yourself. And make no mistake, this is not about pride. It's about alignment. When you know where you're going, you don't detour for approval. You don't slow down to be liked. You don't speed up to be noticed. You move at the speed of your purpose. If someone wants to be part of that, they will step forward with clarity, not confusion, not half effort, not occasional interest. And if they don't, you let them pass without resentment. Because confidence doesn't punish, it precedes. That's why I say real value stands visible. It doesn't hide, but it also doesn't chase. It stays in the open, doing the work, building momentum, allowing alignment to happen naturally. And here's the final truth that ties all of this together. When you stop chasing, you give others the space to choose you freely. Not because you convinced them, not because you pressured them, but because they recognize something stable, something real, something moving forward without needing permission. That choice when it comes means something. So if you take one thing from this, let it be this: move forward so decisively that anything meant for you has to catch up.